They called me a drama queen. They thought my grief was their cover to steal my life, my identity, and my late husband's $35 million. They mistook my silence for surrender. This is the story of how I lay on a hospital gurney, saw my family celebrate my collapse on social media, and deployed the legal countermeasure that bought my son's prison sentence. I didn't just survive, I settled the score. Got a story of justice? Send your powerful tales to womenstoriessegmail.com and don't forget to like and subscribe. Now let's begin. The lights in the emergency room corridor hummed with an irritating, frantic energy, like tiny, caged alarms. I lay on the gurney, the thin sheet doing little to quell the chill, trying to scroll through a generic mobile game on my unnamed brand phone. At 63, I, Victoria Sterling, had just been diagnosed with a minor transient ischemic attack, TIA, or a mini stroke. The doctor attributed it to severe stress, a polite way of saying my body had finally staged a revolt against the 3 years of emotional turmoil I'd endured. The nurse, a kind woman with tired eyes, checked the monitor readings. "We called your son, Mrs. Sterling. He should be on his way." I nodded faintly, though a cynical certainty settled in my stomach. The call to my son, Gregory, had been made 40 minutes ago. Just then, a notification popped up on my phone from a well-known social media platform. My daughter-in-law, Chloe, had tagged me. How thoughtful, I thought, the irony sharp and metallic on my tongue. I tapped the screen, expecting a brief thinking of you message. Instead, my world fractured. It was a perfectly lit, smiling family photo. Gregory sat beaming at the head of the antique oak dining table, the one my late husband, Arthur, and I had bought on our 30th anniversary. Chloe was radiant, wearing an expensive, unnamed brand athletic jacket, occupying the chair I used to reserve. 12-year-old Lily, my granddaughter, looked slightly uncomfortable, but was smiling politely. They were in my house on Willow Creek Lane, enjoying a lavish, home-cooked meal. The caption made the TIA diagnosis feel irrelevant. The real damage was done by the words, "Finally, a night without the pressure. Dinner is so much more peaceful. Blessed family time. Drama-free, unnamed brand home 47. Likes already." My sister-in-law, a notorious gossip, had commented with a celebratory fire emoji. I stared at the screen, every word a deliberate surgical cut. While I was lying alone in an emergency room after suffering a stroke, they were celebrating my absence and publicly branding me a drama queen. Gregory had received the hospital's call and chosen the drama-free dinner instead. The nurse returned with discharge papers. "I'll call a taxi," I said, my voice shockingly steady, devoid of the tremor I felt inside. As I waited in the brightly lit, impersonal lobby, I made a call. I didn't call my son. "Martha," I said, addressing the real estate agent on the other end. "Victoria Sterling. Remember that house on Willow Creek Lane, the one you called a piece of history? I'm ready to list it, effective immediately. You are likely wondering how a well-off woman, the widow of a successful engineer, ended up in a position where her own son publicly mocked her medical crisis. The answer is simple. I believed in the illusion of family loyalty. It started exactly 3 years ago, just weeks after Arthur's funeral. The grief was a physical weight, making the 4-bedroom historical home feel like a mausoleum. Arthur had left me the house, significant life insurance, and investments enough to live extremely well. I was emotionally shattered, but financially secure. Gregory was initially attentive, stopping by often with Chloe and Lily. I misinterpreted his attention as filial devotion. "Mom, you can't live rattling around in this huge house alone," he'd said, one cold November evening, sitting by the fireplace Arthur and I had installed. It's not healthy. And with my unnamed brand tech startup failing, we've depleted our savings. We need stability. Chloe chimed in. All these memories, Victoria. It must be so hard for you to manage the property taxes and upkeep on a fixed income. The truth was, my income wasn't fixed, it was substantial. But their concern seemed genuine. They proposed a solution that, in my state of shock and grief, sounded like a lifeline. They would move into the house temporarily to manage the property and give Lily continuity in her school district. I would downsize to a small, furnished apartment nearby. It's just temporary, Mom, Gregory had insisted, pulling out a document. A family partnership agreement. Just formalizes that you retain ownership and we handle the bills and maintenance in lieu of rent. Maybe a year, tops, until we can recover from the startup loss. I signed. I should have suspected something when Gregory, a week later, started redirecting my mail, bank statements, investment notices, credit card offers, to the Willow Creek Lane address under the pretense of managing my affairs while I grieved. The temporary arrangement stretched into 2 years, then 3. Every time I cautiously raised the topic of them moving out, there was a new, urgent crisis. Gregory's job market struggles, Chloe's sudden pregnancy scare, a false alarm, but they had already bought nursery furniture using their savings, they claimed, or Lily's supposed difficulties with middle school transitions. My visits became strained. My belongings were relegated to a damp storage unit or mysteriously appeared in donation piles. They painted over the vintage wallpaper Arthur and I had chosen. I felt like a forgotten resident of my own life. But the worst offense was becoming invisible to my own family, a person whose main function was to provide the roof over their heads. Martha Henderson answered the phone with the efficiency of a true professional. At 72, she had a reputation that preceded her. Victoria, I was wondering when you'd call me about that magnificent property. Willow Creek Lane is a gem. Are you absolutely certain about listing it? Absolutely, Martha. I want it listed immediately. How fast can you move? I need the paperwork ready yesterday. Martha chuckled, a dry, approving sound. That's the fire I remember from our old volunteer days. But honey, we're talking about real estate law. Even with rush processing, we have standard disclosure periods and a minimum of 30 days for closing. We can't just evict them today. The reality check was necessary, though disappointing. This wasn't going to be a quick, dramatic, cinematic moment. Fine, I conceded. Thoroughness is better. But Martha, I need complete discretion until the listing is ready, and I need to understand my legal position regarding their occupancy. Smart woman, Martha praised. This is not just a real estate transaction, it's a family property dispute. I won't move without proper counsel. I'm bringing my attorney friend, Carolyn Hayes, tomorrow morning. She specializes in family and property disputes. She's ruthless, which is exactly what you need. I hung up, feeling a strange mix of dread and exhilaration. Dread because I knew Gregory and Chloe would fight with the venom of cornered animals. Exhilaration because after 3 years of being invisible, I was finally taking action. The next morning, Martha and Carolyn Hayes arrived at my small, rented apartment. Carolyn was a sharp, impeccably dressed woman in her early 50s who exuded the competence of someone who rarely lost a case. Victoria, Carolyn began, spreading legal pads across my kitchen table. Let's start with the basics. This family partnership agreement, was it ever filed? Were any rent payments exchanged? No, it was just family helping family. The agreement was vague about formal rent, just that they'd cover utilities and maintenance in lieu of paying me. Carolyn exchanged a knowing glance with Martha. That's both good and bad news. Good, because you retain clear ownership rights. Bad, because they might try to claim tenant protections, or even worse, adverse possession after 3 years of continuous, unsupervised occupancy. We need to be surgical. Adverse possession? What does that mean? My coffee suddenly tasted like battery acid. It means we need to handle the eviction process with extreme caution, Carolyn stated. And there's something else. Martha did some initial research on the property records. Martha slid a folder toward me. The tax records show several liens were filed and released against the property over the last 18 months. Home improvement loans, primarily. All properly documented and paid off. Did you know about those, Victoria? I stared at the documents, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I never authorized any home improvement loans, not one. Carolyn leaned forward, her voice dropping. Victoria, when did you last check your full credit report? I hesitated. I don't remember. Maybe 2 years ago. Gregory was managing my mail. We need to pull your credit report immediately, Carolyn commanded. If they've been intercepting your financial correspondence for 3 years, there could be activity you are completely unaware of. As Carolyn made urgent calls to credit monitoring services, I sat there, the weight of my past naivety crushing me. They hadn't just been exploiting my house. They'd been exploiting my grief. Carolyn hung up the phone. Victoria, we need to meet again tomorrow. There are several accounts showing suspicious activity linked to the Willow Creek Lane address that require immediate investigation. Martha packed up her papers, her face grim. Honey, I think selling the house might be the least of your problems. The following morning felt heavy with grim certainty. The moment Carolyn Hayes walked into my apartment, I knew the news would be devastating. She didn't offer any polite greetings. She simply slid a thick packet of documents across my tiny kitchen table. My complete 3-year credit report and supplemental account statements. Victoria, Carolyn began, her professional tone barely concealing her disgust. This is worse than we feared. The mail redirection wasn't just to manage your bills, it was to manage your identity. My eyes scanned the first page. It felt like reading the financial record of a stranger. The $75,000 home equity loan was there, taken out 6 months ago, secured against the Willow Creek Lane house. The forged signature, crude yet effective, was enough to turn my stomach. But the fraud was systematic. There were 3 major credit cards I had never opened, each with limits between $15,000 and $20,000. Personal loans, store cards from an unnamed brand department store, even a luxury unnamed brand jewelry credit account. All accounts were current and in good standing, with payments being made from a separate checking account linked to the Willow Creek Lane address, an account I had no knowledge of. The phone number listed on every single fraudulent account was Gregory's cell phone. Carolyn leaned forward. They have been systematically stealing your identity for at least 18 months, Victoria. They created a parallel financial life funded by your credit. Your signature was forged multiple times. I found myself focusing on the detailed statements. The yoga studio membership, $200 monthly for Chloe. The personal trainer and high-end gym membership, $350 monthly for Gregory. Lily's private tennis lessons, $400 monthly. Lessons she had never mentioned taking. Then I found the big charge. A single charge for $8,000 at a luxury unnamed brand resort in St. Lucia during December. They told me they couldn't afford a big Christmas that year, I whispered, the rage cold and sharp. They said they were keeping things low-key and even missed a family gathering. They were in St. Lucia, on my dime. The final insult was a jewelry store purchase for $3,200 made 2 days prior, precisely the day I was in the hospital with the TIA. The documentation is detailed and clear, Victoria, Carolyn concluded. They have stolen at least $108,000 this way over the past 18 months, all while making you feel like a burden. We are filing criminal charges immediately. This is financial elder abuse, and it is felony fraud. The phone started ringing at precisely 7:23 a.m. the next morning. It was Gregory. I had blocked his main number after the hospital incident, but he was calling from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail while I made my coffee, a rich, dark roast I had bought for myself, refusing to justify the expense to anyone. The voicemail was everything I expected, a performance laced with indignation and self-righteousness. "Mom, we need to talk. There's some crazy woman calling about listing the house. Obviously, there's been a mistake. Call me back immediately." Obviously, there's been a mistake. As if the very idea of me making a decision without consulting him was an impossible comprehension. The phone rang again. This time it was Chloe. I answered on the fourth ring. "Good morning, Chloe," I said, my tone calm and calculated. "Victoria, what the hell is going on? That realtor called Gregory. She said she's our listing agent now. This has to be some kind of scam." Chloe's voice was high-pitched, bordering on hysterical. "Actually, Martha Henderson is my listing agent. She's been in business for 30 years. I would hardly call her a scammer." "Your listing agent? What are you talking about? You can't just sell our house out from under us. We've been living here for 3 years." "Living there? Yes. Owning it? No. The deed is still in my name, Chloe. It always has been." A heavy silence followed, thick with panic. I could hear Gregory's muffled voice in the background. Clearly, I was on speakerphone. But we've been maintaining it. We've put money into improvements. We painted the whole upstairs with unnamed brand paint," Chloe stammered. "Paint that I paid for," I reminded her, "along with the new washing machine, the roof repair, and every utility bill for the past 3 years. Gregory's voice cut in, sharp and accusatory. "Mom, this is insane. You can't just sell our home out from under us." "Our home?" The phrase was a physical slap. It stopped being our home when you started celebrating my hospitalization on social media. Finally, a day without the drama queen. Ring any bells? Posted while I was in the emergency room yesterday? The line went quiet, the silence this time confirming the guilt. When Gregory finally spoke, his indignation was replaced by desperate wariness. "Mom, that post wasn't about you. We were talking about a neighbor." "Of course it wasn't. Just like all those times you've been too busy to return my calls weren't about me either. But here's what truly matters right now. We need to have a very serious conversation about the $75,000 home equity loan taken out in my name 6 months ago, the one I never authorized." The silence that followed was absolute. I hung up and blocked both their numbers. The time for reasonable discussion was over. After hanging up, I sat down and opened an old leather-bound journal. I started making a list. Not a shopping list or a to-do list, but an accounting of every dismissed phone call, every canceled plan, and every time I had been made to feel like an inconvenience. February 2024. Asked Gregory to help move boxes in my apartment. He claimed he was busy with work, but Chloe posted photos of them enjoying a weekend at an unnamed brand ski lodge the same day. January 2024. Invited to Lily's school performance. Chloe forgot to save me a seat. I stood in the back while strangers sat in empty chairs. December 2023. Christmas. Christmas morning at their house. I brought high-end gifts. They gave me a scented candle from the unnamed brand clearance rack. It still had the markdown sticker on it. I spent hours reviewing Chloe's social media, something I had avoided. The pattern was a meticulous record of my exclusion. Family vacations I had never heard of. Birthday parties where I was conspicuously absent. Under a photo from Lily's 12th birthday party, which I knew nothing about until seeing the pictures online. Commenter: "Did Grandma Victoria make it?" Gregory's reply: "Mom's gotten really demanding lately about attention and involvement." We decided it was better to keep things small and stress-free for Lily. Demanding about attention and involvement in my granddaughter's birthday party. They weren't protecting themselves from my grief. They were protecting their narrative of being heroic caregivers, managing a difficult, elderly woman. Carolyn arrived late that afternoon, carrying a new file. The credit report had confirmed all the charges, but the inquiries section revealed something terrifying. "Victoria, you need to see this. Before you called me, they accelerated their plan." She pointed to multiple inquiries listed over the past 8 months. Elder law attorney, guardianship services, financial assessment, protective services, and elder care assessment services. "They weren't just stealing your money," Carolyn explained, her voice grave. "They were building a case. The mail blocking, the financial fraud, the social isolation. It's the textbook pattern for financial elder abuse leading to guardianship proceedings. They were planning to have you declared legally incompetent and seize full control of your remaining assets." My breath hitched. They didn't just want my house and my money. They wanted my identity and my autonomy. They were trying to erase me completely. "Selling the house just became a lot more urgent," Carolyn concluded. "But even more urgent is filing the criminal charges. If we don't move fast, they might accelerate their timeline and file their guardianship petition first." I looked at the file of financial fraud, then at the social media posts mocking me. "How quickly can we file criminal charges?" Carolyn smiled, and the smile was not entirely pleasant. "How does today sound for the charges, Victoria? And tomorrow for the formal house listing?" The next day, the legal machinery moved with devastating speed. Carolyn Hayes was true to her word. By noon, the criminal charges against Gregory and Chloe were officially filed with the district attorney's office. The charges were severe: identity theft, credit fraud, forgery, and financial elder abuse. The total amount documented exceeded $108,000, making it a felony case that could not be easily dismissed. I felt a profound, chilling sense of finality. This wasn't a family feud anymore. It was a criminal prosecution. I was trying to process the gravity of the decision when my apartment intercom buzzed, frantic and persistent. It was Lily, my 12-year-old granddaughter. My heart immediately plummeted. Using their own child as a weapon, a new low, even for them. I buzzed her up. Lily stood at my door, eyes wide and red, clutching a small, worn backpack with an unnamed brand logo. Tears streamed down her face, leaving tracks in the dust. "Grandma Victoria," she choked out, holding the bag tight. "Please don't make us homeless. Mom says we'll have to live in our car." The raw, innocent pain on her face was a dagger to my heart. I guided her immediately to my tiny apartment sofa, noting how her parents had remained in their car outside, close enough to coach her performance, far enough away to claim ignorance. "They sent you here alone?" I asked, my voice as gentle as I could manage. Lily nodded, fresh tears spilling. "Mom packed my bag and said I should stay with you since you're making us move out." She said maybe if I talked to you, you'd remember that family is supposed to take care of each other. The manipulation was so blatant, so textbook, it was almost insulting. But Lily was a victim here. "Sweetheart, come inside and have some cocoa," I said, ignoring the obvious cue. "Did your parents explain why I'm selling the house?" She shook her head vigorously. "They just said you changed your mind about letting us live there, that you don't want us to be happy anymore." I sat down beside her, choosing my words with the care of a demolition expert. "Do you remember 3 years ago when Grandpa Arthur died and your family moved into our house?" "Yeah, to take care of it while you figured out what you wanted to do." "That's right. It was supposed to be temporary. But what if I told you that in all this time, your parents never once looked for their own place, never saved money to move out? Instead, they've been using my name to borrow money for things like luxury vacations and expensive purchases that you never got to enjoy." Lily's face scrunched up in deep confusion. "But Dad said we couldn't afford our own house because his unnamed brand tech job doesn't pay enough." "Then maybe they shouldn't have spent $8,000 on a trip to St. Lucia last Christmas." Her eyes widened, horrified. "We didn't go to St. Lucia." My blood ran cold. "What did you do for Christmas, sweetheart?" "I stayed with my friend Mia's family for a week," she whispered. "Mom and Dad said they had to go help sick relatives in another state, but they couldn't take me because I might catch something. They hadn't just stolen my money. They had abandoned their 12-year-old daughter with friends while they vacationed on stolen funds. They weren't just thieves, they were negligent parents." A car horn blared outside, a long, impatient blast. It was Gregory's signal that Lily's performance should be wrapping up. I walked Lily downstairs, holding her small hand tightly. The feeling of protection was fierce and absolute. Gregory rolled down the window as we approached. He looked smug, confident the emotional appeal had worked. "Well, did you talk sense into her, Lily?" I leaned down to the window level, placing my hands on the hot metal. "I talked the truth into her, Gregory." His eyes narrowed. "Mom, if you could just be reasonable." "Gregory, if you ever use your daughter as a manipulation tool against me again, I'll add child endangerment to the criminal charges I filed this morning." His face went ashen, all color draining away. "What criminal charges?" "Identity theft, credit fraud, forgery, the $108,000 you and Chloe have stolen from me over the past 18 months using fraudulent accounts, and the most egregious one, plotting to have me declared legally incompetent to complete the theft." Chloe leaned across from the passenger seat, her voice cracking. "We haven't stolen anything. That money went to household expenses and family needs, like the new unnamed brand water heater." "Family needs?" I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "Like the tennis lessons Lily doesn't take? The luxury vacation Lily didn't go on? The $3,200 unnamed brand jewelry you bought the day I was in the hospital?" "You're being dramatic," Chloe snapped. "This is what family does. They support each other." "You're absolutely right," I said, my voice hardening. "That's exactly what family does. They support each other. They don't abandon each other in hospitals. They don't celebrate each other's absence. And they definitely don't steal each other's identities to fund luxury lifestyles while abandoning their own daughter at Christmas." I opened the car's back door. "Lily, you're coming with me. Your parents need to figure out how to be actual adults before they're fit to take care of anyone. You are now under my temporary care." 3 weeks after the charges were filed, Carolyn Hayes' downtown office felt like a sophisticated war room. Legal documents covered every surface, and she had assembled a team to handle the sheer volume of the case. "The good news, Victoria," Carolyn said, adjusting her reading glasses, is that your son and daughter-in-law left a paper trail that would make a forensic accountant weep with joy. The bad news is that this level of systematic fraud suggests they've been planning this for much longer than we initially thought. Lily was sitting across from me, quietly coloring in an unnamed brand architecture book I'd bought her. She had insisted on being present to understand what her parents had done. The pattern goes back almost 4 years, Carolyn continued. The mail redirection started immediately after Arthur's funeral. The fraudulent accounts began 18 months ago, but the groundwork was laid much earlier. They used your grief as cover for a long-term theft operation. There's something else, Carolyn added, sliding a document across the desk. I had my investigator do some digging into their history. This isn't their first time pulling something like this. The background check revealed a chilling pattern. Before moving in with me, Gregory and Chloe had lived with his elderly Aunt Martha for 2 years. She died unexpectedly at 84, leaving her estate to an unnamed brand charity instead of to Gregory. After her death, the charity's attorneys found significant financial irregularities in Martha's accounts, money that had disappeared in the months before her death. They never proved anything conclusively, Carolyn explained. Aunt Martha had been showing early signs of confusion, so the family decided not to pursue criminal charges. But the pattern is unmistakable. Lily looked up, her expression serious. Is that why we moved in with you so fast after Grandpa died? Because they couldn't live with Aunt Martha anymore. I hugged her gently. I think so, sweetheart. But we're safe now. What's most concerning, Carolyn continued, is that the inquiry pattern on your credit report shows they were preparing for the final phase, the conservatorship proceedings. They were trying to get you declared incompetent before you could expose them. By fighting back, you disrupted their entire timeline. Now, instead of looking like concerned families seeking help, they look like criminals caught in the act. Emergency custody hearing for Lily is scheduled for tomorrow, Carolyn concluded. Given the evidence of child abandonment and financial crimes, I'm confident we'll get temporary custody. Victoria, you did the right thing. I looked at my granddaughter, who finally lifted her head and spoke with a quiet certainty. Grandma Victoria, she said, I don't want to go back there. Not until they stop lying about everything. 3 days after filing the criminal charges and the emergency custody petition for Lily, the phone rang relentlessly. Gregory and Chloe had been forced to rely on burner numbers and temporary messaging apps since I blocked them. I ignored them all, but I couldn't ignore the collateral damage they were inflicting. My phone rang just after breakfast. It was Diana, my sister-in-law on Arthur's side, a woman known for her cautious nature and loyalty to the family unit. I almost missed the call, but decided to answer. Victoria, thank goodness it's you. Diana's voice was strained, thick with forced relief. I've been worried sick ever since I heard about the charges. Gregory has been calling everyone. What exactly has Gregory been telling everyone, Diana? I asked, preparing myself for the inevitable. Diana hesitated. He's saying you've had some kind of breakdown, that the mini-stroke triggered paranoia and confusion due to the grief over Arthur. He claims you're making wildly false accusations against him and Chloe out of confusion, and that they were trying to help you get professional, long-term care to protect you and your estate. There it was. The narrative they had carefully constructed for months, now being deployed as their defense. Any rational accusation I made would be instantly dismissed as the confused ramblings of a paranoid, grieving widow. Diana, I said calmly, letting the factual truth settle slowly. I need you to know that everything I have discovered is documented and verified. Bank records, forged signatures, fraudulent accounts, and their multiple consultations with elder law attorneys to have me declared incompetent. This isn't confusion or grief. This is criminal financial abuse. I believe you, honey, Diana replied, sounding shaken. And Victoria, I'm so sorry I didn't speak up before when I noticed things that seemed wrong. What kind of things? The way they talked about you at family gatherings, how they made you seem like a burden they were heroically managing, how they intercepted calls meant for you saying you were too fragile to handle family business. I thought they were just being protective, but looking back, Diana's voice trailed off, guilt evident. After hanging up, I looked at Carolyn, who had been listening on speakerphone. Classic pattern, Carolyn confirmed. Isolate the victim, control the narrative, then swoop in as the concerned family member who needs legal authority to protect someone who's clearly become incompetent. We disrupted their timeline, but they are still fighting with their pre-established narrative. We need the custody victory tomorrow, I stated. Winning Lily's custody will instantly undermine their concerned family image in court. 6 weeks later, the house sale finally closed. Martha Henderson had worked wonders, finding cash buyers, a young couple with 2 small children, who paid asking price after a short bidding war. Houses with motivated sellers and great locations move fast. Standing in the empty living room on Willow Creek Lane for the last time felt like a strange, liberating farewell. This house held 35 years of beautiful memories with Arthur, but the past 3 years had tainted every corner with manipulation, theft, and lies. Lily wandered through the cavernous rooms, running her small hand along the doorframes where her height had been marked at different ages. "It's weird seeing it empty," she said, her voice quiet and echoing. "Everything looks different without furniture and lies filling it up," I replied. Lily looked up and managed a small, genuine smile. The young buyers, unaware they were purchasing a crime scene, were charmed by the house's history and solid construction. They had no idea the significance of the final exchange taking place in the driveway. Martha handed me the cashier's check with a satisfied, almost triumphant look. $400,000 net proceeds, Victoria. Not bad for a motivated sale. That represents your freedom, honey. Holding the check felt surreal. It wasn't just financial freedom. It was freedom from the psychological web of manipulation that had trapped me for 3 years. The sale of the house was the physical excision of their power. My phone buzzed constantly with updates from Carolyn. The district attorney's office was taking the case very seriously, partly because of the high dollar amount, and partly because the systematic nature of the fraud suggested a pattern that might extend to other victims. Aunt Martha was now under retroactive investigation. But the most interesting update came from an unexpected source. Detective Marcus O'Connell, the lead investigator on the financial elder abuse case. "Mrs. Sterling," he had called Carolyn to explain. "We found something troubling in Gregory and Chloe's digital files. We found extensive searches related to your husband's death, medical records, insurance payouts, estate documentation. They were mapping your entire financial situation within weeks of the funeral. The calculation is chilling." "And the conservatorship?" Carolyn pressed. "Even better evidence of intent. We found draft documents on their home computer. A conservatorship petition dated 8 months ago. They were planning to file it next month, right around the time you would have been most isolated and appeared most confused to outside observers." "What stopped them?" I had asked Carolyn when she relayed the information. "You did, Victoria. By fighting back, instead of accepting their narrative, you disrupted their timeline. Now, instead of looking like concerned families seeking help for an incompetent relative, they look like criminals caught with the evidence." That evening, Lily and I sat on the small, rented balcony of my apartment, watching the city lights and eating takeout from an unnamed brand Italian place. It was simple, quiet, and required no family committee discussion. "Grandma Victoria, can I ask you something?" Lily said quietly, pushing her pasta around. "Of course, sweetheart." "Are my parents going to jail?" I considered how to answer honestly without inflicting unnecessary trauma. "They are going to face very serious consequences for what they did. What kind of consequences depends partly on whether they take responsibility or keep lying about it. But they have to face the law, Lily." She nodded solemnly. "I hope they learn something from this. About honesty." "Me too, honey. Me too." My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It read, "This is Chloe. We need to talk. There are things about this situation you don't understand." I showed the text to Lily. She read it and rolled her eyes with the weary wisdom of someone who had heard too many manipulative explanations in her short life. "Are you going to call her back?" Lily asked. "What do you think I should do?" Lily thought for a long moment, tapping her fork against the plate. "I think people who steal money and lie about it don't get to demand conversations. They need to talk to Carolyn." 12 years old, and already wiser than her parents. The emergency custody petition had been granted that afternoon. Lily was officially safe. I set my phone down, the need for revenge replaced by the quiet, fierce duty of protection. The war to save my money was over. The war to raise this girl right was just beginning. The courtroom was sterile, quiet, and imposing. It was the setting for the final, definitive separation between me and my son's family. The emergency custody hearing for Lily was procedural but vital. The first time Gregory and Chloe would face a judge since the criminal charges and the sale of the house. Gregory and Chloe sat across the aisle, looking like shadows of their former selves. Gregory was disheveled, wearing a suit that was clearly wrinkled from being packed in a suitcase. Chloe was pale, her expensive, unnamed brand jacket replaced by a cheap, dark sweater. They were now financially afloat only by the grace of whatever cash they hadn't put on my credit cards. Carolyn Hayes was a force of nature, presenting the case with surgical precision. She opened not with the fraud, but with the immediate safety of the minor child. "Your Honor," Carolyn stated, addressing the Honorable Judge Anna Reed, "the petitioners, Gregory and Chloe Sterling, demonstrated systematic abandonment of the minor child, Lily Sterling, using the pretense of a family emergency to cover their unauthorized, fraudulent luxury vacation to St. Lucia. This fact alone, combined with the subsequent attempt to manipulate the child into emotionally coercing the maternal grandmother, is sufficient grounds to award temporary emergency custody to Victoria Sterling." Gregory's court-appointed attorney, a nervous-looking man named Mr. Davis, rose to object. "Objection, Your Honor. The grandmother's claims of abandonment are part of a larger paranoid narrative fueled by recent medical issues and grief. The child was left with a trusted family friend. A trusted friend whose parents were led to believe the petitioners were tending to a critically ill relative, not sipping cocktails on the beach using stolen funds," Carolyn cut in, holding up the damning credit card statement showing the St. Lucia charges. "And the notion of a paranoid narrative is, in fact, the calculated defense strategy against the felony charges of identity theft and attempted conservatorship, filed days before this hearing." Judge Reed silenced the room with a sharp rap of her gavel. She looked directly at Gregory and Chloe. "The court finds clear and convincing evidence of financial instability and a severe lapse in judgment regarding the minor child's well-being. Furthermore, the systematic nature of the financial fraud, now confirmed by police investigation, presents an immediate threat to the child's future stability. The minor child, Lily Sterling, shall remain in the temporary custody of the paternal grandmother, Victoria Sterling, pending a full review. Gregory slammed his fist quietly on the table, a sound of defeated rage. Chloe burst into silent, theatrical tears. I remained still, only meeting Carolyn's eyes. The first victory was secured. After the hearing, I called Diana to update her on the custody ruling, knowing she would pass the information through the family grapevine, countering Gregory's false narrative. "They're devastated, Victoria," Diana admitted. "They were relying on Mr. Davis to paint you as erratic. Now the family is seeing the court documents. It's difficult to argue paranoia when the bank statements are presented." "They brought this upon themselves, Diana." The true measure of their desperation hit a few hours later. Lily and I were at the apartment, planning to visit the local library, when the delivery man rang. He was dropping off several cheap, worn plastic bins and a few bags containing clothes and toiletries. "From the unnamed brand extended stay suites on the highway," the man mumbled, checking his clipboard. "Gregory Sterling asked me to drop this off. Said he didn't have time to retrieve his daughter's things." Lily looked at the collection of cheap plastic, the few remnants of her life in the big house. She recognized one of the bags. It contained her mother's makeup and a couple of expensive scarves. "They threw my books in the bin with my smelly gym shoes," Lily observed, her voice flat. "And they didn't send my favorite teddy bear, Mr. Higgins." I realized then they hadn't just lost the house and the money. They had lost their footing, their carefully constructed reality. They were living out of a low-end extended stay hotel, a stark contrast to the historical mansion they had inhabited. They were financially paralyzed. The fraudulent credit accounts were now frozen, and the money from the house sale was securely in my accounts. Gregory was not a planner, he was a reactionist. When he ran out of my money, he would panic. My phone rang. It was an unknown Seattle number. I hesitated, then answered. "Hello?" "Mrs. Sterling, this is Jennifer Wells, Chloe's sister. Please don't hang up." The call lasted nearly an hour, and it confirmed the chilling timeline Carolyn had pieced together. "I tried to warn you years ago," Jennifer whispered over the phone line. "I sent you a letter after Arthur died, telling you to watch your finances, but I guess Chloe and Gregory screened your mail." "They did," I confirmed, gripping the phone tightly. "They intercepted everything." Jennifer explained that her sister, Chloe, and Gregory weren't just opportunists, they were professionals. Before your husband, it was my mother-in-law, Bernice. Chloe moved in, saying she was helping out because Bernice was fragile. Within 18 months, Bernice's home equity was maxed out, and she was forced into a quick, low-priced sale. Chloe and Gregory walked away with the cash and left Bernice in an assisted living facility she couldn't stand. This was the same calculated playbook they had run on Aunt Martha, and then on me. "And me?" I asked, my voice cold. "You were the prize, Victoria. Your late husband's investments, the house on Willow Creek Lane, it was a huge target. They planned to milk the fraud accounts until they had enough collateral to file the conservatorship, then legally bleed your estate dry." "Why are you telling me this now, Jennifer?" "Because Chloe called me yesterday. She's demanding I transfer her money she owes me from the Bernice incident, to pay their new legal fees. She's threatening to expose some secret about my ex-husband if I don't help them." Jennifer took a shaky breath. "I won't be their accomplice anymore. They need to face this. And you need to know they will never stop. They will try to file the conservatorship again from prison if they have to. They are addicted to this lifestyle." I looked at Lily, who was carefully sorting her abandoned belongings. "Thank you, Jennifer. Your testimony will be invaluable to the district attorney." I hung up, a new resolve settling in my bones. It was time to go on the offensive. Carolyn had secured Lily's safety. Now we had to ensure Gregory and Chloe lost their freedom forever. I called Carolyn immediately. I have a new witness and a new pattern of elder abuse spanning 3 families, I told her. We need to make sure the district attorney understands this isn't a family dispute. This is serial financial predation. The investigation escalated swiftly after Jennifer Wells's testimony and the temporary custody victory. Carolyn Hayes had leveraged the severity of the financial elder abuse charges to push the district attorney's office for a deeper dive. The DA, keen to make an example of a high-profile white-collar crime, assigned a veteran forensic accountant, Mr. Alan Price, to the case. Mr. Price met with Carolyn and me 2 weeks after the custody hearing. He was a meticulous man, his suit as crisp as his analysis. He laid out a complex, color-coded chart on Carolyn's conference table, showing the flow of money. "Mrs. Sterling," Mr. Price began, tapping a pointer on the chart, "the fraud is not complex in execution, but the planning is masterful. It revolves around 2 key phases: isolation and extraction. Isolation. Your son and daughter-in-law systematically intercepted your mail for 3 years, creating a black hole around your financial life. This allowed them to screen out any communication about your unnamed brand investment dividends, allowing them to claim you were living on a fixed income while suppressing the true extent of your wealth. Extraction. This began 18 months ago. They opened the fraudulent accounts, all with the house on Willow Creek Lane as the mailing address. The funds weren't just used for luxury. They were used to create a perfect illusion of financial success for Gregory. He pointed to a large block labeled Startup Injection. The credit reports show a pattern of large cash withdrawals, $15,000 to $20,000 at a time, which were immediately deposited into Gregory's failing, unnamed brand tech startup bank account. He was using your credit and forged loans to prop up his business, not just his lifestyle. He was laundering stolen money through his business, Carolyn summarized grimly. Precisely. And here's the most alarming part, ma'am. Mr. Price pointed to a series of inquiries from an unnamed brand private equity firm. 6 months ago, Gregory was in negotiations for a significant investment round for his startup. He leveraged the fraudulent home equity loan and the inflated lifestyle, all built on your credit, to appear solvent and successful to these investors. If you hadn't fought back and sold the house, not only would you have lost your estate, but these investors would have sued you when Gregory's fraud collapsed. So, they were planning to make me the ultimate scapegoat, I said, the calculation of their malice staggering. They planned to leave you holding the bag for his failed business, his debts, and the conservatorship fees, Mr. Price confirmed. Your quick action not only saved your money, but prevented a massive, complicated civil lawsuit that would have ruined your retirement. The pressure on Gregory and Chloe intensified. With the house sold, the custody lost, and the criminal investigation closing in, they were facing a total loss of their current life. Carolyn received daily updates from their court-appointed attorney, Mr. Davis, who was becoming increasingly frustrated. "They are living in a state of denial, Victoria," Carolyn reported during a quick phone call. "Gregory is still arguing that the St. Lucia trip was a business development excursion, and the forged signatures were merely administrative oversights done to protect you from confusing paperwork. I am sending a formal notification today that the DA intends to seek high bail and possibly pre-trial detention, given the flight risk and the systematic nature of the financial crime." Later that afternoon, my doorbell rang unexpectedly. I checked the peephole. It was Nancy, my late husband, Arthur's cousin, a sweet, elderly woman who had always been kind to me. She looked terrified. Victoria, I had to see you, Nancy whispered, trembling as I let her in. I just got off the phone with Gregory. He was frantic. He called me from a borrowed phone at the unnamed Brand Motel. What did he want, Nancy? I asked gently, guiding her to the couch. He asked me for $50,000. He said he needed to make things right with the lawyers and cover unforeseen administrative costs. He sounded desperate. He's running out of money, Nancy, I explained, trying to keep my voice neutral. All the fraudulent accounts are frozen, and the house money is gone. He's desperate for bail money or cash to disappear. Nancy started crying softly. But he said if I didn't help, Lily would be taken away permanently, and you would go to jail for instigating the fraud. He said you were the one who suggested they move in and manage the accounts. The manipulation was relentless, now targeting the most vulnerable people in the family. Nancy, that is a lie. I have legal documents proving everything. Lily is safe with me. Gregory and Chloe are criminals, and they are trying to steal from you now, just like they stole from me. I spent the next hour showing Nancy the basic court documents, the custody order, the credit report excerpts. By the time she left, her fear had been replaced by a cold, angry determination. "Thank you, Victoria," Nancy said, her voice firm. "I'm calling my lawyer immediately. I will tell the DA everything Gregory just tried to do." The day of the arraignment arrived 1 week later. The courthouse buzzed with anticipation. The local news media, tipped off by the DA's office about the elder abuse ring, were present, though kept at a distance. Carolyn and I stood near the entrance, waiting for the proceedings. The good news is that Nancy's call was recorded by the police as attempted witness intimidation and secondary fraud, Carolyn reported. The judge will hear about that this morning. The bail is going to be exceptionally high. As we spoke, Gregory and Chloe were escorted into the courtroom. They looked beaten, their faces etched with fear and fury. Chloe tried to catch my eye, but I looked straight through her. The arraignment was a formality, but the judge's comments were anything but. Judge Reed, who had handled the custody hearing, presided again. She listed the charges. 23 counts of felony fraud, including identity theft, forgery, and grand larceny. The state notes the systematic nature of the crime, the history of similar behavior against a deceased relative, Martha Sterling, and the recent attempt at witness and family intimidation. When she reached the bail recommendation, the courtroom hushed. Given the documented theft of over $108,000, the strong evidence of intent to defraud multiple parties, and the high risk of flight, bail is set at $250,000 cash for each defendant. The number hit Gregory and Chloe like a physical blow. Their court-appointed attorney immediately protested the amount, citing their current lack of assets. Judge Reed delivered the final, crushing sentence. The defendants are considered an extreme flight risk and a danger to the financial security of their family members. Bail stands. They will be remanded into custody immediately. As the bailiffs moved to secure them, Gregory turned, his face distorted by pure hatred. "You did this, Mom. You'll regret this." I met his gaze, my expression completely blank. "No, Gregory," I thought to myself. "You did this, and I'm the one who bought your sentence." I turned and walked away with Carolyn, leaving my son and daughter-in-law to the justice they had earned. The 6-week war was over, but the full trial was yet to come. Lily was safe, and I was free. The initial shock of the $250,000 cash bail for each defendant was wearing off, replaced by the grim reality that Gregory and Chloe could not afford it. Their attempts to liquidate any remaining assets were blocked by the district attorney's office, which had placed freezes and liens based on the fraud investigation. Carolyn Hayes and I received weekly updates from the detective Marcus O'Connell. "They've tried everything, Victoria," Detective O'Connell reported during a meeting at Carolyn's office. "They petitioned the court to release a portion of the house sale proceeds, claiming it was their sweat equity and unpaid wages for managing the property. Denied. They tried to get a third mortgage using the old house as collateral, unaware the sale had already closed. Futile." "So they are still in custody?" I asked, feeling no satisfaction, only a quiet, resolute calm. "Yes. They are currently housed in a minimum security facility, but they are very aware of their situation, and their despair is starting to yield some interesting information. Chloe is trying to cut a deal." "What kind of deal?" Carolyn interjected, professional skepticism etched on her face. "She offered to testify against Gregory regarding the identity theft and the use of the funds in exchange for a lighter sentence. She's claiming Gregory orchestrated the whole thing, exploiting her as the naive wife." Detective O'Connell snorted. Given the evidence that she handled most of the fraudulent credit card spending and posted the damning social media messages, that defense won't hold up in court. But it does show their marriage is collapsing under the pressure. Meanwhile, the new buyers of the Willow Creek Lane house, the young couple with twins, were preparing to move in. The final physical evidence of Gregory and Chloe's presence was being erased. One morning, Martha Henderson called me, sounding exasperated. "Victoria, I have the most incredible audacity to report. Gregory tried to use a proxy. He had his college roommate, a man named Kevin, try to purchase the Willow Creek Lane house back from the new buyers, the Miller family. He offered them a $50,000 premium, cash, using funds from a mysterious offshore account." "Offshore account?" I was stunned. "Yes, a small account in the unnamed Brand Islands. We believe it's the remaining profit from the Aunt Martha fraud, laundered through the failed startup. The Millers told Kevin to get lost. They love the house. The attempt to reclaim the house, even from behind bars, showed a level of entitlement and obsession that was chilling. They didn't just want the money, they wanted the trophy back." Life with Lily had settled into a comfortable routine. She thrived in my quiet, structured environment, excelling in school and becoming more open about her past life with her parents. We were sitting together one rainy afternoon, working on a history project that required reviewing old documents. Lily was quiet for a long time, staring at a small antique locket I wore, which held a tiny picture of Arthur. "Grandma Victoria," she began softly, "I remember something weird about the mail." I looked up immediately. "Tell me, sweetheart." "About a year ago, Mom and Dad were really worried about some paperwork. It was a big brown envelope with an unnamed brand bank logo. They were yelling in the kitchen." "What were they saying?" "Dad was saying, 'If she signs this, it's all over. We have to intercept the renewal.' And Mom was saying, 'We need the conservatorship filed before the unnamed brand trust renewal.'" I felt a cold wave wash over me. Arthur, my late husband, had established a sophisticated, multi-layered trust designed to protect my assets from exactly this type of predatory behavior. The primary trust required a mandatory renewal and recertification of competency every 3 years, designed to prevent the assets from falling into the wrong hands should I become genuinely ill or incapacitated. The 3-year mark from Arthur's death, and thus the trust renewal deadline, was in 2 months. "The trust renewal," I murmured, realizing the terrifying implication. They weren't just racing to file the conservatorship to take my money. They were racing the clock to beat the trust's anti-predator clause. If the trust was renewed and certified with me as competent, the entire estate would have become untouchable by them. They weren't just stealing. They were in a desperate race against a ticking clock set by my late husband. Arthur had protected me from the grave. I immediately called Carolyn. "We need to contact the unnamed brand trust officer right now. I need to formally execute the competency renewal and ensure the trust documents are fully updated and filed before the end of the month." Carolyn quickly arranged the meeting. The unnamed brand trust officer, Mr. Jonathan Chen, confirmed Lily's story. "The 3-year renewal clause is indeed imminent, Mrs. Sterling," Mr. Chen stated, reviewing the complex document. "Had you been declared incompetent before this deadline, the court-appointed conservator, which they intended to be themselves, would have gained authority over the trust. Your actions to file criminal charges and establish your competency have preempted their final, most devastating move." "They were playing a completely different game than we thought," Carolyn observed, impressed by the depth of Arthur's planning. "They were," I agreed. "And now we activate Arthur's final defense." I signed the stack of documents, certifying my competency and renewing the trust for another 3 years. This action formally closed the legal window of opportunity for Gregory and Chloe to ever access the main estate assets, regardless of the outcome of their criminal trial. "This is the end of the line for them, financially, Victoria," Carolyn noted, watching me sign the final page. "They can fight the criminal charges, but they have zero civil claim to your wealth now. Arthur really did think of everything." As I finished signing, a news alert flashed on Carolyn's phone. It was an update on the case. "Gregory and Chloe tried to bribe a guard this afternoon," Carolyn reported, reading the screen. "A small amount of cash, smuggled in during a visitor meeting with their desperate college roommate, Kevin. They were attempting to facilitate an escape. They are now being moved to a high-security facility." I looked out the window, the sun breaking through the clouds. My son and daughter-in-law were now facing severe penalties for attempted escape, adding to their mountain of fraud charges. Their desperation had sealed their fate. "It seems their pattern of entitlement and poor judgment holds even in prison," I observed quietly. "The war against my money is finally over, Carolyn. It's time to focus on the final battle, the trial itself." The transfer of Gregory and Chloe to a high-security facility following their attempted bribe sealed their fate regarding bail. They would be awaiting trial behind bars. The increased pressure and isolation immediately began to fracture their united front. Detective Marcus O'Connell called Carolyn Hayes with an update that was less about evidence and more about human nature. "The spousal unity is gone, Carolyn," Detective O'Connell stated. "We have them in separate, high-security wings. Chloe is demanding to talk to the DA, offering a full confession on the identity theft if she can get a plea deal. She's explicitly throwing Gregory under the bus, claiming he coerced her and was solely responsible for the conservatorship plot." "Does she have any leverage?" Carolyn asked. "Not really. We have bank statements, social media posts, and forged documents proving her active participation. She signed the home equity loan application right alongside him. Her naive wife defense is weak. However, her testimony does strengthen our case on the systematic nature of the fraud and the money laundering through the unnamed brand startup." The pressure on Gregory was clearly immense. His court-appointed attorney, Mr. Davis, was now actively seeking to withdraw from the case, citing an irreconcilable breakdown in communication and the fact that his client was now actively threatening him. Meanwhile, Lily was grappling with the reality of her parents' situation. She was thriving in school, but the weekly supervised calls with her parents were traumatic. She would come home quiet and withdrawn. "They just keep telling me it's all a big mistake," Lily confessed one evening while doing homework. Dad keeps saying if I just tell the judge I miss the house, they'll let him go. He calls me a bad daughter for living with you when they are suffering. That is psychological manipulation, Lily, I said, putting my arm around her. They are hurting, but that does not give them the right to use you. They are responsible for their own suffering. You are not. I immediately called Carolyn and demanded the supervised calls be cut to once a month, with a mandatory monitor present to enforce a strict no discussion of the case rule. The well-being of my granddaughter was now the primary focus. Carolyn scheduled a final strategy meeting before the pre-trial motions began. We met with Detective O'Connell and Mr. Alan Price, the forensic accountant. The focus was now on establishing the criminal pattern that went back 4 years. Mr. Price laid out his completed analysis of the Aunt Martha case. Aunt Martha's bank records were severely fragmented, Mr. Price explained. But we found evidence that within 3 weeks of moving in, Gregory established an automatic deposit from her primary checking account into a new joint savings account, ostensibly to manage her expenses. By the time she died, that account was empty, and the bulk of the money was routed through a local cash exchange service before disappearing into the unnamed Brand Islands account Gregory tried to use for bail. And the connection to Bernice, I asked, referring to Chloe's mother-in-law, the victim identified by Jennifer Wells. That case is harder, but the pattern is the same. Move in, establish control over mail and accounts, extract assets, in that case through a forced low-value home sale, and abandon the victim, Carolyn summarized. The DA is going to argue that Gregory and Chloe operate a highly coordinated, multi-jurisdictional elder abuse ring. This elevates the case from simple family fraud to a serious, calculated conspiracy. The detective then delivered the final, most chilling detail regarding Arthur's death. We re-interviewed the hospice nurse who was present during Arthur's final weeks, Detective O'Connell revealed. The nurse recalled Gregory and Chloe being oddly insistent on 2 things: making sure Arthur's final will remained as it was, leaving everything to you, and pressing the nurse about your daily medication schedule. Why? I asked, my blood turning cold. They needed you to inherit everything so they could target the larger pool of assets. If Arthur had been alerted to their true intentions and changed the will, their entire scheme would have been ruined, and they needed to know your medication schedule so they could establish a baseline of confusion or instability in preparation for the conservatorship case they planned to file later. They were calculating your vulnerability before your husband even passed away. The sheer depth of their plotting, calculating my vulnerability while I grieved, was the ultimate betrayal. I realized I hadn't just been a target of opportunity. I had been the intended long-term mark for a pair of professional predators. With the evidence overwhelming and the trial date set, Carolyn prepared for the final confrontation. We met one evening at my apartment to review my own testimony. Your testimony needs to be powerful, Victoria, Carolyn instructed. You must show the judge and jury not just the monetary loss, but the emotional cost, the fear, the isolation, the calculated cruelty of celebrating your mini-stroke on social media. I am ready, I said. I am no longer the grieving widow they tried to paint. Good, because Gregory's new lawyer is going to try to paint you as the bitter, unstable mother who initiated this whole thing out of spite after your son wouldn't move back home. Let them try, I countered. We have the evidence. We have Lily's testimony on the abandonment. We have Jennifer Wells on the sister-in-law's fraud. We have the forensic accountant on the money laundering. And most importantly, we have the trust documents proving their final move was blocked. Carolyn smiled, a genuine expression of admiration. I told the DA's office that you were the widow who didn't just survive the attack. You deployed countermeasures. You are a legend in the making, Victoria. That night, after Lily was asleep, I sat in my small living room reviewing the files one last time. I came across the last letter Arthur had written me. Not his will, but a simple, heartfelt note he had penned shortly before his diagnosis, advising me on life without him. Don't let anyone make you feel small, my dearest Victoria. You are stronger than you know. You built this life with me, and you have every right to protect it. Be gentle when you can, but fierce when you must. I realized Arthur hadn't just left me money, he had left me a license to fight. Gregory and Chloe had mistaken my grief for weakness. They had learned too late that some widows bite back. The final battle was set. The day of the criminal trial was overcast and tense. I arrived at the courthouse with Carolyn Hayes and Lily, who was waiting in a monitored room with a social worker. The courtroom was packed. The local media had latched onto the widow versus son narrative, and the case was being closely watched in the elder law community. Gregory and Chloe were brought in, looking pale and gaunt in prison-issue clothing. They avoided my gaze, though their legal counsel, a public defender for Gregory, and a new, aggressive attorney for Chloe, who was pursuing the coerced wife defense, stared me down. The prosecution, led by District Attorney M.S. Helen Chen, opened with a devastating summation of the systematic fraud. She focused not just on the $108,000 stolen, but on the calculated cruelty. This was not a mistake, M.S. Chen declared, pointing at Gregory and Chloe. This was a calculated 4-year scheme designed to isolate a grieving widow, steal her identity, prop up a failing business with her credit, and culminate in a conspiracy to have her declared legally incompetent, thereby seizing full control of her life and estate. The first witness was Mr. Alan Price, the forensic accountant. He laid out the money trail with ruthless clarity. The $8,000 St. Lucia vacation, the $3,200 unnamed brand jewelry purchased while I was hospitalized, and the final damning piece, the cash injections into Gregory's failed startup, funded entirely by my forged loans. The defense lawyers tried to poke holes, arguing the transactions were loans managed within a family partnership. But Mr. Price simply pointed to the multiple forged signatures and the attempts to purchase the house back using offshore funds. The next day, Jennifer Wells took the stand. Her testimony, detailing the identical pattern of fraud used against Aunt Martha and her own mother-in-law, Bernice, was explosive. It painted Gregory and Chloe not as desperate family members, but as a dangerous, serial financial abuse unit. Chloe's attorney tried to discredit Jennifer, claiming she was motivated by a long-standing sibling rivalry, but Jennifer held firm. "I am motivated by justice," she stated. "They ruined 3 families with the same lie." The climax of the trial came when I took the stand. I was calm, impeccably dressed, and armed with the truth. Carolyn led me gently through my testimony, detailing the initial days of grief, the temporary move, and the gradual, suffocating isolation. I described the moment I saw the social media post. I was lying on a gurney, recovering from what the doctors called a mini-stroke brought on by stress. I saw the photo of my son, his wife, and my granddaughter in my house, celebrating my absence. The caption called me a drama queen. That moment was a turning point. It was not grief. It was clarity. The defense attorney for Gregory then took over, attempting to execute the final, most brutal part of their strategy, attacking my character and competence. "Mrs. Sterling," the attorney began smoothly, "isn't it true that after your husband's death, you were emotionally unstable? That you were forgetful, anxious, and expressed an inability to handle your own finances?" I was grieving, I replied firmly. I was not incompetent. Grief is not incompetence. But you willingly handed over all control of your mail and finances to your son, did you not? You relied entirely on them for 3 years. Isn't this pattern consistent with the confusion that led to the attempted conservatorship filing? No, I said, meeting his eyes. It is consistent with the trust I placed in my only son. A trust he exploited to isolate me, not to protect me. And the conservatorship was not filed by me, but by them. A final, calculated move to seize my entire estate. A move we proved by finding their draft documents. The attorney then played the final card, the recorded conversation between Gregory and Nancy, my cousin-in-law, where he attempted to intimidate her for bail money. Isn't this evidence, the attorney argued, that Gregory was desperate and confused, not a criminal mastermind? He was trying to protect his family. He was trying to commit a new fraud while already in police custody, I countered, my voice clear. He threatened an elderly relative for money, and he used his own daughter to try and coerce me. That is not a sign of confusion, counsel. That is a sign of a predator who feels entitled to everyone else's resources. The jury looked visibly disturbed. My testimony, combined with the hard financial evidence, had successfully demolished their defense of good intentions and mistakes. The jury deliberated for less than 6 hours. When they returned, the courtroom was silent, every breath held. Judge Reed asked the foreman to read the verdicts. The foreman stood. On the charge of identity theft, we find the defendant, Gregory Sterling, guilty. The defendant, Chloe Sterling, guilty. The room exhaled a collective gasp. On the charge of credit fraud and grand larceny, we find the defendant, Gregory Sterling, guilty. The defendant, Chloe Sterling, guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to commit financial elder abuse, the final, most crucial charge regarding the conservatorship plot, we find the defendant, Gregory Sterling, guilty. The defendant, Chloe Sterling, guilty. A loud, muffled sob came from the defense table. Chloe immediately collapsed, crying hysterically. Gregory remained stiff, his face devoid of expression, a mask of cold, furious defeat. I felt no euphoria, only a sense of profound, weary justice. The system had worked. My son and daughter-in-law were now convicted felons. Judge Reed immediately revoked bail and scheduled sentencing for 30 days later. As the bailiffs moved in to escort the convicted, Gregory briefly lifted his head and looked at me one last time, a look of pure, concentrated hatred that I knew would never leave me. I turned and walked toward the back, where Carolyn was waiting. "It's over, Victoria," Carolyn whispered. "You won." "No," I corrected. "We found the truth. Now we wait for the sentence." The battle for my estate was done, but the emotional reckoning was just beginning. Lily was waiting, and her future was all that mattered now. 30 days after the guilty verdict, we returned to the courtroom for the sentencing phase. The atmosphere was different now. There was no ambiguity, only consequence. Gregory and Chloe sat before Judge Anna Reed, their faces pale but hardened. They had exhausted every legal maneuver, including firing their latest lawyers and attempting to represent themselves, a motion Judge Reed swiftly denied. The prosecution, M.S. Chen, was succinct. She requested the maximum sentence for each charge, citing the systematic nature of the fraud, the attempted witness intimidation, the attempted escape, and the history of serial predation, confirmed by the Aunt Martha and Bernice cases. "Your Honor," Ms. Chen concluded, "the defendants used a cloak of family trust to inflict sustained, calculated abuse on an elderly, grieving victim. Their actions were not impulsive. They were a business model. A clear message must be sent to protect the vulnerable in our community. Financial predators who use their own family must face the full weight of the law. The judge then allowed Gregory and Chloe a final statement. Gregory stood, his voice trembling with forced indignation, not remorse. Your Honor, this is a terrible miscarriage of justice fueled by my mother's paranoia. I was attempting to manage her accounts and save my business. She has ruined my life out of spite, and she has kidnapped my daughter. I ask for leniency so I can provide for my family. Chloe, choosing her last chance to appear sympathetic, played the coerced victim. I was a devoted wife, trying to stand by my husband. I regret signing those papers, but I was simply trying to keep our family together. I beg you to consider the separation from my daughter, Lily. I watched them, devoid of emotion. They were still spinning the narrative, even in the face of hard evidence. Judge Reed delivered the sentence without hesitation. She first addressed the financial loss, ordering full restitution of $108,000 to me, noting that the funds would be nearly impossible to recover given their lack of assets. Then came the penalty. Defendant Gregory Sterling, Judge Reed stated, her voice sharp and final. For identity theft, financial elder abuse, and conspiracy, you are sentenced to 12 years in state prison. Gregory's composure instantly shattered. He collapsed into his chair, a strangled cry escaping his lips. Defendant Chloe Sterling, the judge continued. Given your history of similar financial crimes and active participation in the fraud, you are sentenced to 8 years in state prison. Chloe began sobbing hysterically, screaming about Lily. Judge Reed banged her gavel until the room was silent, then addressed the final detail. Custody of the minor child, Lily Sterling, is hereby granted permanently to the paternal grandmother, Victoria Sterling. The defendants have 30 days to file an appeal. Justice was delivered. 2 months later, the chaos had faded into quiet stability. The appeals were summarily dismissed. Gregory and Chloe were serving their time in 2 separate facilities, their lives utterly dismantled by their own greed. Lily was thriving. She was enrolled in a new, smaller private school, funded by the now untouchable Arthur Trust, taking the actual tennis lessons she always wanted and excelling in her studies. The dark shadow of her parents' manipulation was slowly lifting. My apartment, once temporary, now felt like home. It was filled with books, art I actually enjoyed, and the quiet laughter of a 12-year-old girl who needed me. I met Carolyn Hayes for dinner at a quiet downtown restaurant to celebrate the official closure of the case files. Do you realize you've become something of a legend in elder law circles? Carolyn said, raising her wine glass. You're the widow who fought back and won. You've inspired other victims to come forward, other families to question suspicious relatives. Good, I said, lifting my own glass. No one should have to suffer what Gregory and Chloe planned for me. So, what's next for you, Victoria? Carolyn asked. A long cruise? A trip around the world? You've earned it. I thought of Lily, rebuilding her life with hard-won wisdom. I thought of the other victims Gregory and Chloe had destroyed over the years, Aunt Martha and Bernice. I thought of Arthur's trust and the power it gave me, not just to defend myself, but to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. What's next? I looked out the window at the city lights. Next, I make sure this never happens to anyone else. Carolyn raised an eyebrow. How? By using every resource at my disposal to fund an unnamed brand elder abuse task force, I said. We've been playing defense. It's time to go on the attack, hunting down predators like Gregory and Chloe before they find their next victim. Carolyn smiled, a glint of excitement in her eyes. That sounds expensive. I can afford it, I replied, feeling the full, undeniable weight of Arthur's love and foresight. That night, I sat in my kitchen, rereading the final letter Arthur had written me, the one that encouraged me to be fierce. He had known this day might come. He had prepared me for it. He had given me the financial and emotional weapons to win a war I didn't even know was being fought. But more than that, he had given me permission to be dangerous. Gregory and Chloe had learned too late that some widows bite back. The war against them was over. But my new war, the war for justice, was just beginning. I looked at the picture of Lily laughing, taped to my refrigerator. I set the letter down, the paper crisp and final. The Sterling reckoning was complete. I was Victoria Sterling, the protector, the avenger, and the formidable drama-free grandma. The verdict is final. Justice is served. Gregory and Chloe are paying the price. But the fight for the vulnerable is never over. Your story is your weapon. If you have survived betrayal, fought back, and won your reckoning, we want to hear it. Send your powerful true story to womenstoriessegmail.com. Like, subscribe, and share this story to empower others.